The Buffalo Sabres mourn the passing of a legend. We'll talk about his legacy in Buffalo and the NHL. Plus, the Sabres prepare for the upcoming season. Can they make the jump to the playoffs this year? All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to thank everyone for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And you can also find us now on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search for Locked On NHL. It is great to finally have back on the show the host of Locked On Sabres, Joe DiBiasi. But Joe, unfortunately, a sad time for Sabres fans and the NHL as really a legend and an institution in Buffalo and around the league passing away last week in Rick Jenneret. Talk to me a little bit about what he meant to the Sabres and to Buffalo in particular.
I mean, thanks for having me, Gil. I think he meant everything to everybody. If you want to talk about the most well-liked figures in Buffalo sports history, like it's not even close. He's number one. He's beloved by everybody. You won't find a fan, a player, an owner, a management person over time that ever had a bad word to say about Rick Jenneret. I mean, he was universally loved. He was really like the perfect bridge between fans and I think the team itself, because he always would take offense to being known as the voice of the Sabres or to, being this big star that everybody loved. And I think because deep down, this I think what made him connect with people is that deep down, he just thought of himself as, I'm a Sabre fan. I just happen to have a microphone in front of me and everybody else doesn't. And I think that, helped connect him to the fan base. But I mean, what did he mean? He was the Sabres. I think if you asked a Sabre fan, the average Sabre fan, who the face of the franchise was, it wasn't Hasek, it wasn't Perreault, it wasn't, any of these players over time. Like it was RJ. He was the voice of the Sabres. And as logos changed several times, as owners changed several times, uniforms changed, players changed, GMs, coaches, everything changed except for that guy who was in that seat for 51 years.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to work with him a couple of times as his statistician when he, came to New York.
Okay.
And just such an easygoing guy to work with and some great stories. And, what you say really does hold true because he was just so easy to talk to. Some announcers, when you do the statistics, they want it a certain way and they want it exactly. He was so easy to work with and so great to talk to as a hockey fan that he made me feel at ease right away.
And part of that, I think, was like he would only have, he would only have the lineup sheet. That's all that RJ would ever have. He would have the lineup sheet with the names enlarged a little bit. And that was it. That's all he wanted. And that's all he needed. Because as anyone that could attest to, I never got the chance to travel on the road with him, but knowing people in the media that have, or people that I work with that have worked with him on the road, anywhere you went out with him for dinner or for a drink that night in a random day in Dallas, wherever you are, he had to have a hockey game on. If you're going somewhere, he's got to have a game on. He would be watching games every night at home. Like, I think part of the reason why, the statisticians and, why he only needed the lineup sheet, I think is part of what made him special among the many things that did, was he watched the game so much. He knew the league so well that, okay, the Sabres are playing the Devils tonight. Oh, I could tell you all about Damon Severson. Why? Because I've already watched him 12 times this year.
Yeah. And I mean, you think about it when he started, what were there, 12 teams, 14 teams, 14 teams, right, I think, in the league. And now it's 32. Such changes that we've seen. And yet he was a constant for so long, for so many fans. I mean, there are so many memorable calls, the Mayday call everybody always speaks of, but was there one that stood out in your mind, a moment for him that just personified what he meant to everybody? And
I think, I mean, the Mayday call is going to be his number one call of all time. I mean, it's so perfect. And, you know, like maybe it's not even appreciated enough. Sometimes I think of it as being like overplayed just because I hear it all the time, but it's really not. It's just, it's so perfect. The timing and all of it. I have an under the radar one that I love. If everyone's ever seen the Brian Campbell hit on RJ Umberger from back in the day, which I still regard, you find me a better hit in NHL history than that hit. And RJ, I mean, it just exemplifies exactly what he was. He would rise to the energy of the crowd. If the crowd went nuts in an instant, he went nuts in an instant. Like, he just matched the energy of the crowd. And in that moment, like, what's a big open ice hit like that? And this, again, if it's not the biggest open ice hit of all time, I think it's one of them. A play like that is 0 to 100. It's, oh, they're carrying the puck up the ice, and oh my God, what just happened? And that is how he reacts in that moment. So it's not even necessarily like a creative call. I mean, he had a bunch of those. But to me, that was just listen to his voice match how that crowd went nuts as if a playoff goal had just gone in. And I think he crushed it. He did have a line like a little bit later in the call, something like he just got run over by a Greyhound bus. You know, so he threw something in there, to make it a little bit colorful, but that's always been a favorite of mine, even though it's way down the list, I think, of his greatest calls of all time.
The Sabres missed the playoffs by 1 point last year. I mean, people may forget that the Florida Panthers, who went to the Stanley Cup final, had one more point in the standings than the Sabres did. What will it take for this team to take that step and end the playoff drought this year?
I think number one answer, honestly, is goaltending. I think it's pretty simply put. This team was third in the NHL in goal scoring last year. Their forward group is basically the same. They're going to be missing Jack Quinn. I think that's a big loss. I think if you asked me this a month ago, who's the number one breakout candidate for the Buffalo Sabres this year, it was Jack Quinn. But he's out probably until December. So it is the same forward group. You're missing him, so that's a loss. But he only scored 14 goals this year as a rookie. So even though there was a jump coming there, I don't think that hurts them a lot. Third in goal scoring last year. Okay, they should be top 10 at least again next year. Defense was another big issue. And while I'm still think they left fans wanting a little bit there in the top 4, it's not like they didn't do anything. I mean, they brought in Connor Clifton, who had been a nice bottom 4 defenseman for Boston. They brought in Eric Johnson to be on the third pair as a veteran presence. So even though I think they could have done better on the blue line, they did do something, and I think they did improve it. They upgraded it. But goalie was a sinkhole for this team last year. Like, let's be honest. Like, Craig Anderson gave them some games, but he was 41 years old. He couldn't play a lot. So, 60% of their games, they were playing with some of the worst goaltending in the National Hockey League. And Devin Levi presents a really exciting potential. He was awesome in the final 7 games of the season, no doubt. But I'm a little skeptical that you could go a whole year with a 21-year-old rookie goaltender and ask him to play 60 games? Because that's what it might take for them to make the playoffs with him playing well, unless they get an upgrade from somebody else. But I'm skeptical right now of the goalie options around Levi. Levi's exciting, but I think your just in case the rookie has a bad month needs to be a lot better than what they have right now.
Before we started recording, you mentioned there's a couple of moves that may be coming down the pike. What are we looking at right now?
Yeah, the thing that we're just kind of waiting on here for the Sabres is a couple of big contract extensions. And for me, I'm only holding my breath for one of them. But Sabres GM Kevin Adams, multiple times this offseason, has spoken about their team and both Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Powers' agencies about contract extensions. And this is not surprising. Adams loves to lock guys up early. He's done it repeatedly. He did it with Tage Thompson. And that looks really well. They look really good. It happened with Dylan Cousins. It happened with Matthias Samuelsson. And all those look pretty good right now for discount deals already. And I think they want to do that with Owen Power. I'm skeptical. I don't think it makes any sense for Owen Power. Because Owen Power, I think, is a higher ceiling than all those guys I just mentioned, even though there's some nice players. I don't think it makes sense for Owen Power to sign a contract after 1 year as a 19-year-old. To what I get why the Sabres want to do it. What do they want? They want to sign him to 8 years, $6.5 million. but I don't think Power is going to do it. So I don't think that contract happens. The Dahlin contract, I mean, I'd be stunned if it didn't happen by the start of the year. I'd be asking the question, if night one happens and Dahlin's not under contract, I'd be asking what went wrong here. Did he want to be the highest paid defenseman in hockey above Erik Karlsson? Like, what's the deal here? But you still got over a month to go until the start of the year. So I don't think there's any panic by any means. He's got another year of his contract, and he's an RFA anyway. But I think the Sabres will make him the highest paid player on the team. I would imagine it's going to be around $10 million a year. But I'll stop short of that thought from a second ago. I don't think he'll be the highest paid defenseman in hockey over Erik Karlsson.
Well, 10 million's nothing to sneeze at. No question about that. We'll keep an eye on that. Joe, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Sneaky Joe Sports on Twitter. You can check out the Locked On Sabres podcast wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, including our YouTube channel. And if you want to check out our most recent episode, we did a fun little exercise with an all-time Sabres draft, drafting all the players from the former Sabres teams. So be sure to check it out.
All right, Joe, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by AG1, a product I literally use every day. I started taking AG1 because I wanted a supplement that didn't require me to take a whole bunch of different pills and would meet all of my nutritional needs. I usually have AG1 in the morning before starting my day, and it gives me energy and makes me feel better before I even begin to work. Look, AG1 gives you 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. And it supports your gut health, nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, aging, all these things. So if you are looking for a comprehensive solution to what you need from your supplemental routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1/NHL network. That's drinkag1/NHL network. Check it out.